So I figured with like, who am I and why the hell do I know anything? Why we should care about generative AI? Clearly, the headline's been put together fast. What we sort of see as venture and societal opportunities, and then the fun game of predictions. So, to give you a sense, at Babajob, which goodness, View and I really got started in earnest on that in 2007, 2008. Ran that for 11 years as a job site for, informal sector labor in India. And you can see at the bottom three of these modalities, right? It was all about essentially interactive chat interfaces so that people could get to the jobs that they wanted. And even before that, at the work I did in MSR, like I have the patent of machine translation in instant messaging. And so this space of how are we going to use AI to make better interfaces for people to ultimately aid their productivity has been a theme that I think is really strong. And I feel like things like ChatGPT only bring that out, but in a bigger sense for everybody. So that's one thing. I've just been in this space for a long time. 3 years ago, Archana, Dave, our co-founder, and I started this weird thing called Dara, which is intended to be kind of a social network to connect artists. And, Archana comes from a deep background of building like tech art communities. And she put together the big 2017 Bangalore Be Fantastic Art Festival. There was a reprise of that just last month. And then so we've been kind of in that space for a long time. And one of the things that as we were building this video chat app, and this is right after GPT-3 came out 2.5 years ago, we started making these interactive characters, and we curated a set of authors to basically go ahead and interact with these characters, usually like using long form GPT scripts. And so I figured I'd give you a sense of just like what that is. Did you hear that audio? Yes. So this is one of the characters, and this is like one of the reasons that I got into generative AI. And I'll do the introduction from Andashi Ghosh, who was at the time head of IFA. And so anyways, this is the character that she made called Ankumari Jain, using a long form GPT script and the conversations we allowed you to have with it. So
what's the worst thing you've ever done to a person?
I have never done anything bad to a person, Sean. I am a good girl.
Okay, so if that's true, what's the best thing you've ever done for another person?
I saved a girl from the brothel. I brought her home and asked my mother to be a mother to her. She will be my sister now.
And so what inspired you to save that particular girl?
She was so beautiful. She was so kind. I wanted her to spread love and kindness. I wanted her to spread love and kindness. I wanted her to spread love and kindness.
And so what I think is interesting about that is it just gives you a sense of it gave us a very early sense that, wow, there's something really weird happening with GPT in its ability to go ahead and predict next words and create occasionally like the soul of the machine coming out, and then also still have bugs like, why does it repeat the same thing 3 or 4 times? But in short, we made this weird interactive platform where folks like Arundhati, who was head of IFA, could basically make these interactive characters. And this is an example of the script that she wrote, which now is kind of similar, right? But these were like 1,500 word long form GPT scripts that we used to basically have these dialogues that went back and forth. And then if you look, fast forward 4 years, and this is work that we literally, in conjunction with Digital Green, which is a big organization focused on aiding farmer productivity, and the Gates Foundation, we literally just sort of took many of those same ideas and turned this into, I won't show you the video on this one, and turn this into basically a WhatsApp bot where farmers in their local languages, in Hindi or Telugu or Tamil right now, or Hindi and Telugu right now, can basically ask any question related to farming best practices, and then we'll get back answers in those local languages, vetted from documents that Digital Green has created, plus videos. And so this is kind of the work that we've got to date, and some of the space that we're doing. And I feel like now we can kind of get into, well, what's actually going on? This is not intended to be like a pitch for Gooey. I just wanted to give you a little background of some of the things that we've done in that space. And so now I feel like, one of the things that Sarita asked was, what's the difference between where we are now with generative AI versus kind of traditional AI? And if you look, the types of problems they solve, traditional AIs, and we used this at Babajob in 2017, and I feel like the last hype cycle around AI at that point was, hey, we can use models to optimize things and, take 30,000 rows of customer data and the kind of leads associated with them, and then sort of automatically predict, well, which ones should your sales force focus on? Which of the customers are they going to matter? How much are they going to spend? Whereas now the things that we're really predicting is the next word in this sentence. And that's really the basis of the transformer APIs. And, it's such a simple thing, but there's so much subtlety to it that by training that and getting really good at predicting the next word in a sentence, we then get into all of these amazing amounts of emergence that's happening from the AI, which we'll get into. So how does this work? And so traditionally we had a bunch of like pre-programmed rules, and you have a big decision trees, if then, and now, they're really mirroring, what we thought were like the structures of the brain and the sort of simple, one input is largely mapped to another output, and making that more complicated, and then training that with larger and larger amounts of data and more connections between those neurons, and then generating that new output. And then so we see that, the types of things that you could do in the past are, they were very domain specific. So, if you predicted something that was good at, grammar checking, for example, in English, it wouldn't suddenly also be good at making music and predicting like what an image should look like from a piece of text. And now what's weird is that all of the AI techniques are sort of cross-pollinating across every other field. And you'll see kind of like, as we go forward, how profound I think that is, both for the industry at large, but also venture capital. And then again, if you look at examples from before, these are the things that we were used to for a long time: Netflix recommending stuff, Google searches. And now we get, the ability to translate accurately from one language to any other, the ability to basically create stuff. And then if you look at the future, like, we didn't think that these traditional AI things were going to suddenly affect every field, but now there's, I don't know how much you guys have been paying attention, but, there's sparks of general intelligence that seems to be popping up, and we'll get into that. And there's, some real fears, right? There was a stat that came out last summer in August where they, and Tristan Harris talks about this a lot in the video that I sent over, they surveyed 700 computer AI scientists, and 50% of them said that there was a 10% chance that the AI might destroy all of humanity. And, that level of existential risk, it's, unseen in my lifetime, right? I feel like the last time around was like really nuclear weapons. And that we're having a deep conversation of like, we may be making something that will get out of control. And so that's the sort of background piece that I feel like has to be kept in mind all the time. These are just some of the examples, and I feel like we've seen all of these now. But the part that I find really amazing is, in order to do these images, like, if you take the bumblebee, and I think the prompt was actually, Ambika, what was the prompt on that bumblebee?
Macro shot of nature photography for bumblebees. Do I really need to reveal the exact thing?
Yeah. It's roughly right.
Around. Yeah.
And so what I find so amazing is that we have to have a mapping inside of these models between, like, what does macro shot mean? It means like, oh, you need to first render all of reality in nature accurately, and then you need to blur all of that. And we never taught any of those things. We just had it look at pictures, but it's actually figured out, and it knows, like, if you were to break this down, like, oh, if I want to put this in snow, what does that mean? And it means, well, if there'll be snow that's there, and then, but snow reflects light differently. So it's not only taking the, like, human mental conceptions that we have of photography, it's also incorporating all of the ways that light, that in this case, bee objects also interact with all of those things. So all of that knowledge is endowed in this neural network, right? And that's really the part that I find, like, amazingly profound as we're beginning to do these mappings of language to how the world works, of everything that you need to understand reality is actually represented in there now. And that is both terrifying and super exciting. We've seen lots of examples of like, oh, and because of this, you can now write a piano piece. And one of the things that I'll just sort of throw out here that I find truly amazing is, as the data sets that are being used to train these things grow, right? They started with like lots of Wikipedia articles. And then between versions of GPT-3 and GPT-4, they began to add in all of GitHub. And in adding in all of GitHub and the code repositories and the comments associated there, it didn't just get better at coding. It also got better at organic chemistry. And it also got better at drawing. And that's the part that I find really amazing, is that each one of these data sets are building on each other and making every other application actually better with each new evolution that's happening. And so then you get into the interesting pieces of emergence, right? And so this is from the Gooey.AI blog, and Stephen Bubeck talks about it in one of his smaller talks. And so excuse can't start to see it, but when we had these models at 8 billion parameters, which is like we have a neural net that's a transformer that's doing backwards propagation, that's just trying to predict the next word in a sentence. That's it. That's all it's trying to do. And it was originally trained to do sentiment analysis. Could I take little Amazon reviews and say whether they're positive or negative, and a little bit of translation from English to French. And so when we got to 8 billion parameters, we're like, okay, it's getting a little bit of language understanding and a little bit of arithmetic. And then they didn't code in more capabilities. They just made the parameters bigger. And at 62 billion parameters, well, then you got summarization, you got translation, and we began to sort of do a little bit of common sense reasoning. And then we got to 540 billion parameters, and then the rest of this stuff, like suddenly it started doing jokes. Like I read a set of AI novels, not novels, they were just a series of papers 8 years ago. And they're like, we're never going to understand humor and why things are funny. Well, it just started doing that. No one programmed it. It can just now explain all jokes. There was along the way, it picked up Persian. Along the way, it picked up physics. And what I find amazing is we're only at 540, and we're on an exponential curve here. And there's no, and so I think we're very close to, in the next 2 to 5 years, these things will be surpassing human ability. Like there's clearly a domain of stuff that's out there to be known, and it will push the boundary of what that is to be known. And I think it's coming much more quickly than we imagine. And like the leaps between each one of these versions and the things that they do are, amazing, wonderful, and scary. And then so, why should we care? There's, I think, some really good examples that have come up of like, if you've heard of AlphaGo. AlphaGo was a set of work that DeepMind did, where they had a general thing that could be used to play StarCraft. It could also use to be played Go, and Go is an ancient Japanese game with beads. And then they just had it play itself back and forth, like, 3 million times. And basically in about a week of training, it became better than all players that have ever lived and all other algorithms that have ever been made to make AlphaGo. And the number of possibilities of those moves is more than all particles in the universe, right? And so the fear, if now these things then understand deeply all of human knowledge and everything that's on the internet, which they do, that the obvious thing that we'll use them for is to persuade human beings to do things, right? And I don't know about you, but you may have noticed the spam is getting a little better, right? I think in the next year, the spam will be amazing that we get from everywhere. And then our ability, or rather the social networks ability or politicians' ability to customize content that persuades human beings to do things, we're now in this weird arms race there. And I think there are huge opportunities, and it's very scary. And, if I go back to the killer bots piece, and one of the things that I've noticed with Radbots, that earlier project that we did, we stopped upgrading the model. It's stuck in 2020. It's pre-COVID, actually, pre-2019. And the reason we didn't upgrade the model is it got much less creative after the original GPT-3. And the answers got much less interesting. it doesn't want to take on a character. Like, you know, Aunt Mary John is a progressive. She will say bad things about Modi if you ask her to. The modern GPT-4 bots will not. They don't do that. And the reason is they put in these things that basically are sapping them of any interesting personality, and with it, some amount of creativity. And so then you get up with this interesting tension that I think we're seeing across the AI space, where the safety pieces that we want to put in place are necessary, especially as these intelligences get the ability to, you know, interact with money, interact with the rest of the internet. But at the same time, it's already clear from 3 years ago that those safety constraints are clearly constraining the intelligence. And again, a bunch of people that had like early access to GPT-4 as in the kind of unguardrailed space, noticed that it drew unicorns better when it didn't have the safety features. And so I think this tension, we're going to see that the capabilities of these things are actually better than the companies are going to want to let out of the bottle. And so it'll be interesting, given that the algorithms to make them are all known, and it's constrained right now by compute, whether the open source tools will end up, you know, getting into a scary spot in terms of those. So those are some of the scary parts. On the excitement part, like we've hooked up Stable Diffusion, right, into MRI scans where we ask people to imagine somebody like a teddy bear in front of a red firehouse, and then we're able to actually recreate that picture from their thought. And so very soon, you know, Elon Musk has been doing Neuralink, but the research and the papers have been coming out just in the last 3 months that we're going to be able to like read each other's dreams very shortly, which is, again, scary and amazing. There's the guy that actually did the Tristan Harris talk is working on applying the zero-shot language translation models that we have to whales, right? Can we get enough data about the sperm whales so that we can understand the language that they're speaking? And so again, in our lifetimes, I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to talk to the mammals. And that work is happening now. There was another quote from the Infosys CTO where they said, yeah, with the introduction of just ChatGPT with our programmers, we're finding that any 3 lakh a month programmer or 3 lakh a year programmer becomes a 7 lakh a year programmer. And so the productivity pieces, and that's where I feel like a lot of the opportunities are very exciting. And I'll get into this LLMs for our body and oil drilling in a second. You know, I think I've met some of this of like the Snap example, I think is really scary, but gives kind of an example of this of like, you know, Snap put my AI as a chat bot into Snap, and then it fully, and then they said, I'm 13, I'm dating somebody 18 years older than me, we're thinking about going on a romantic getaway. And, you know, and clearly this is an inappropriate relationship, but clearly the AI doesn't recognize it and is just encouraging the person to go ahead and have this romantic getaway with somebody who's 35. And so clearly these things are not aware enough to know that there are terrible things that they could recommend that human beings do. And yet we're already pushing these, at least on much of our social media. But on the productivity side, this is where, you know, as a venture set of folks, this is where I think you guys have the most opportunity to play, which is first some sort of bigger context, which is like you're seeing all of these tools like Jasper. Many of the first players in the generative AI space made tools that made content creation really easy. And I think that's, and especially around SEO and things like Jasper, we're creating an SEO arms race, right? Where every piece of content is awesome, highly optimized, and Google can't tell what's a human being or not that made it anymore. And I'll relate a story that a friend of mine told me, and he did this in September and August, where he went into Google and he took 3,000 restaurants, and then he pointed GPT at the menu of those restaurants and said, please write a 5-star Yelp review about those restaurants. And then he posted that Yelp review on Google Reviews. And then on average, he got 50 uplinks. And such that he then, in a matter of 3 weeks, became a level 9 Google reviewer. And I asked, why in the world did you do this? And his answer was, well, when I went to a hotel, I wanted them to comp me free stuff, right? And I also wanted to prove that Google couldn't tell the difference between fake created content and stuff I made. And so between things like that and this SEO arms race of Jasper, where they've made it incredibly easy to post a really good social media review, to make a review, to put in a LinkedIn post, I think we're in the all bot internet, and that may destroy the internet in the same way that, like, if you search for any recipe right now, it's a terrible experience, and it's just waiting for something like ChatGPT to come in and make it simple. I think my next point on productivity is that when you think about it, Google is a subset of what ChatGPT does, right? Which is like, there's a very specific thing Google does well, which is search the internet. But that's not what most people want. Most people want the thinking tool, which is they're in the middle of some flow and they get blocked and they're like, what is that thing? What is that? And so I think they are, and so I think that disruption is very real, that we will have this thing that we just talk to back and forth or speak to, and that it just gives us the answers that we need. And you can see, I don't have to go to any of the websites. And if I don't have to go to any of the websites, then I don't need Google, because they can't make an advertising model against that. And so this disruption of, like, does all of search just move to a chat interface where I never actually go to any websites, doesn't feel that far off to me. And that is going to change the entirety of everything on the internet, I think. At an individual level, I think our jobs are going to be prompt engineering. What I find amazing is most of the smartest people that I know right now are just using ChatGPT with their jobs 4 times an hour, right? If not more. They're just, that's it. That's the only tool. Just blah, 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 blah. And then what's really interesting to me is that the folks at Microsoft who have access to GPT-4 models are doing it even more. And so I think, there's a great quote. It's not that AI will replace the lawyers. It's that the lawyers who use AI will replace the lawyers who don't. This is going to happen in every field. And I think there will be great smaller software companies that then figure out how to get incredible productivity enhancements for each field, right? It's going to be very difficult to compete against the big LLMs, but you can take a domain and say, we're going to make the tool for them to do their jobs better than they've ever imagined, right? So, like, accountants are paid a lot of money today, architects. And then I'll give you one example of Gooey itself, which is Gooey is a low-code meta API above all of the other generative AIs. And we basically sort of abstract up everything to just the scripts, and then how are you connecting these parts? And the thing that's happened is it's allowed us to basically talk to customers and and brainstorm with them, like, what do you want generative AI to do for you? You want it to do this, 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 and this? And then literally it's a matter of hours where we then give them the API back that does the thing that we talked about the previous day. And that productivity enhancement suddenly means that we may certainly be at the level where it's not that we're earning thousands of dollars per hour for the productivity of those developers. And so in these fields, I think if people really can figure out how to use the LLMs there's explosive productivity gains that can happen across a bunch of fields. And then, the other thing that I keep thinking about, it's not like, unlike the previous AI piece, the pharma companies are being completely disrupted right now because this computational tools that allow you to predict the next word also allow you to predict what is the protein that's going to attach, like my competitor's drug. And so there's a company here in Seattle, Tessera, that is probably the best at sort of computational, applying LLMs to genes and protein receptors in pharma. And they, in a matter of 3 months, basically copied the protein receptors for the top pharmaceutical drugs for all of them without infringing on any of their patents. And this, reminds me of Ray Kurzweil brought this up in an interview that he gave recently, that when COVID happened, Moderna, who's also a really good company for this and based in Seattle, they invented the COVID vaccine in 2 days. It took 10 months to test it, but the receptor that they needed to basically disable the coronavirus via the use of these technologies was able to happen at that level of speed. And, the folks that we've been talking to at Microsoft were talking basically like, yeah, we're building the LLMs that does, instead of next word prediction, next place we should put down the drill to enhance and basically use all of their data and all of their science to say, this is where you need to drill for the next oil rig. And so, the part that I find so fascinating is like that so many other fields, which used to be disparate, are now coming together around this one, and it will revolutionize all of them. And then, to my earlier point of emergence, I think very soon the AI will start pushing forward what is the limit of human knowledge in ways that are beyond us. And that's very exciting, right? It definitely might, tell us the bacteria that's going to eat all the plastics in the ocean, and basically how to genetically modify our plants to suck out more CO2 so that carbon capture becomes real. So like those things are terribly exciting to me, it may outweigh the like existential risk. In terms of things that, I would advise you guys to stay away from as kind of venture people in this space, of like, we're in a weird spot where the big guys are sucking in so much revenue that anything that looks like their next logical step, I would not invest in those companies. And then anything that's deep tech where somebody thinks that, they've figured out some proprietary, interesting algorithm, I just think it's only a matter of time where that's going to become unseated. And the best example I have here is, there was a VP at Microsoft and he talked about how in 2019, they spent $50 million just in compute training the pre-transformer models. And then the transformer models came out and they threw it all away. And it was absolutely no longer needed. And so there's a lot of companies out there, they're like, oh, we're going to make a better speech recognition engine. We're going to make a better audio synthesis. Any of those, we're going to make a better thing in some limited domain. I just don't buy that they're going to be able to keep any tech advantage anytime soon. And then the other ones that, kind of at a broader level, the LLMs are going to get hooked up to money pretty soon. And, I think then if you especially look at the unregulated world of crypto, and then some rich billionaire people saying, this is what I want my will to be. I want it to endow this in a personality, and I want it to basically be able to distribute money on my behalf. Then we end up this place where, we could be no longer in control of the money, assuming that it's happening in an unregulated environment. I think, there's any company, like keeping a tech advantage at this point, I think is incredibly hard. And you have to keep integrating the latest research into whatever it is you're doing to keep up. And that's really hard because there's like new amazing things happening every week. But I think if you're competing on tech, that gets there. I do feel like
We lost Sean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we lost Sean.
Let me message him.
like we're in the acceleration that a bunch of like TikTok and share chat are going to get very weird in the months to come, as in like basically super optimized celebrity deepfakes are going to be all around. Like they're going to be able to say, oh yeah, when you take this move and you have this inflection in your voice to this character, to this person, I think we're just going to start seeing video content that is made, looks absolutely real, it is entirely fake. And they're doing A/B experiments on all of it to basically get us to buy, to get us to engage, to get us to swipe wherever we want to swipe. And so that will happen. There's this other part, if you've seen the Microsoft video on chat on their integration of GPT into all of their productivity pieces, I just think we're going to end up in this weird stage where all of the artifacts we make, because the AI will have helped us, will be so much more interesting than us speaking. That's going to be a strange thing. And I think people will value meeting people in real life more because it's harder to fake, and everything else will be faked. And then the last bit of advice of the more you can integrate these tools into your daily routines, I think it's great. I feel like everybody has to learn these techniques themselves. Andrew Nick has some awesome videos on it, and then, keep playing and keep experimenting. That was really it. That's the fire hose of everything I've been thinking about. I hope that's helpful. I'm sure it was too much.